So it's with great pleasure that Steve has agreed to share some of his experience with us on Sandpaper. And I doubt if you buy it at Harbor Freight, do you?
No.
Oh, do they?
Yes, right down in the mall area.
I should have been a little, is that coming through? Yep. How about that? Is that coming through? All right. I should have taken a closer look at this lathe. I'm so used to having them set up all the time, I didn't even look until just now and I realized we don't have a chuck and a tail live center. So they're working on it. So anybody here know the first rule of sanding? The first rule of sanding? Nobody?
Use it like somebody else buy it.
Exactly. That's the first rule of sanding, is to sand as if somebody else were paying. Oh, that made a big difference. As if somebody else were paying for your sandpaper. Make all the difference in the world. Going back a few years, 20, 30 years back in wood turning, so we really didn't have access to good abrasives. We went to the hardware store and bought the abrasives there. And even then, the abrasives that we bought there weren't the ones you can buy in a hardware store today. But today, most of us don't buy our sandpaper or abrasives in the hardware store anyway. We order them from specialty supply houses. And back, about 20 years ago or so, we started having the availability of commercial grade abrasives that were a little bit more expensive than what we'd been using, but boy did it make a difference. It made a huge difference in what we could do and how quickly we could do it. And we still have access to those today. And we're going to show you some of them. We're going to start out by doing a couple of things here. First of all, I'm going to pass this around. This is, what's that? This is, we're going to sand the inside of this here tonight. And I'm going to pass it around so you can run your fingers around in here. We got a little nipple in the middle here. There are nice little ridges and ripples around here. So you can see that the way I used to sand, I would probably look at that and think, man, that's going to take me probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. Now we'll see, we'll time it tonight and see what it takes us to sand that down to a nice shiny gloss finish. And I'm going to pass this around also. We'll start half of it here and half of it in the back here. This is a handout. Gives you some basic information about sanding. And for those of you online, Bob Madison will be sending out PDFs of this handout, so you will get a hold of them eventually. I had the good fortune, by the way, of going to 3M quite a few years ago, again around 20 years or so ago. I had a best friend, or have a best friend, whose wife was the vice president of the abrasives division of 3M. And that got me into their little commercial advertising thing. I'm not sure what you'd call it. It was a beautiful little small auditorium where they would bring in their big commercial customers, and I got to go through that, and it was pretty doggone amazing. And they, among other things, they took us into some machine rooms where they had some machines they were working on. One of them that was most impressive that I'll pass on to you is that they had a belt grinder for grinding metal. And to demonstrate it, they had pieces of cast iron that were 1 inch square and 6 inches long. And they had a little spring-loaded device to feed those into the belt grinder. So they set that thing down in there, and they kind of pull the spring back, and they turn on the belt grinder, and they hit the release. And that 6 inches of cast iron went zip, just about like that, and it was all gone. It was... To this day, I still, shake my head and think, "Holy cripes! What kind of a deal could that be, and what could you do with it?" So anyway, we're using those kind of things, and we'll kind of follow I'll kind of follow along with this a little bit. The abrasive materials that are used are listed here. Emery and garnet are the ones that us real old farts can remember from way back. Especially the garnet. That used to be the woodworkers' sandpaper all the time. And it's a really good sandpaper, works really quickly, but it has one big flaw, and that is it doesn't last very long at all. What happens with sandpaper as a general rule is it either gets dull or it fractures down to the point where it no longer gives you the scratch pattern you're looking for. And by the way, all abrasives create a scratch pattern. So even if you get down to 8,000 grit, it may look like it's shiny and polished, but if you take a look with a microscope, you will see a scratch pattern that was produced by that particular abrasive. So emery is one that's been around for a long time, a natural one that's still used for metalworking to some degree. You can still find garnet in cheap sandpapers. I wouldn't bother with it at all because it is, we have stuff that's so much better. Aluminum oxide is probably the one that you're going to find most often. Most sandpapers that you buy. It's a really good abrasive. It's the most popular. And it's hard and tough and it's resistant to wear, so that's a good deal, thank you. Silicon carbide. The silicon carbide papers that we usually think about are like this. They're dark and they're wet or dry, and usually found in the finer grits. These are great if you want to lap something that doesn't have to be perfectly lapped. You can lay it down on a flat surface, put a little moisture on there, and rub it on there, and get a really nice flat surface. Silicon carbide, aluminum zirconia. That's best for heavy stock removal and high pressure grinding. Probably what that belt was in that machine that I described earlier. Ceramic aluminum oxide. This is one that is really popular, a lot more popular now than it used to be. Here's an example of 3Ms. This stuff, when it first came out, this is 900Z, 900DZ. When it first came out, I sold this stuff, and I think we probably sold it here. And this will last, they say, 3 to 4 times as long as aluminum oxide. I found that if you keep blowing it off with an air hose and keep it clean, it lasts a lot longer than that. It keeps on cutting. Really good stuff, but it's also quite expensive. I don't remember what this was per sheet back then, but it was in the dollars, not in the pennies. Diamond, I have some examples of that here. We don't have any practical use for it. You would use diamond in certain really precision type operations and stuff like that. Really not much sense in us spending much time in it. Steel wool is on here. There are still people that use steel wool on wood. One of my friends that makes spoons is known for that, and when I visited the Smithsonian American Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., we got to go to their Lender Conservation Laboratory, and they had one of his spoons that they had been working on. Actually, he was part of our group visiting there, so they used that as an example to show what they could do. But they had one of his spoons in the Smithsonian collection, and their job in the Lender Conservation Lab is to take an article and to investigate it to the nth degree and determine how it needs to be stored to make it last for centuries. You know, what kind of humidity, what kind of light situations, how long can it be displayed, how often, you know, once every 10 years, every 50 years for 30 minutes, or can it be out for 24 hours a day for 6 months, that sort of a thing. And among other things that was kind of interesting about that is they found an unusual compound in there. Oh, they have some interesting, they have electron microscopes spectrometers, all of these things that they're using to evaluate this stuff with. Fascinating place. But they found out there was something they couldn't quite figure out on his stuff, and they finally realized that what it was is he used stainless steel on these, or stainless steel wool on these spoons, and that tiny particles of the steel wool had gotten in there and reacted with one of the finishes he used in an unusual way. They figured that out before we ever got there, you know, and so that goes in their records and stays with that piece. What goes on behind the scenes in some of those museums is just unbelievable. So then we have, those are all the stuff you put on top.
Where does Abralon and Habitat fit in?
We'll be talking about those in a little bit. So yeah, that's a combination. You notice when we get talking about substrates now, a lot of the sand, we call it sandpaper, and a lot of it is on paper and different weights of paper. You may have something that's pretty doggone thin, and you may have some papers that are really, really heavy, and they make a difference in how you use them. Cloth, of course, is a very common one. This is an example of heavy cloth and a very, very rough, coarse grit. We'll just pass this one around just for the heck of it. That again is probably the zirconia on that particular one. And then there are fibers like the non-woven pads that sure would have those. Scotch-Brite, the non-woven fiber pads with, if you want to look at this later, this shows a whole bunch of different kinds that 3M makes. We'll have that up here. I'll throw it over here where folks can get to it. And film, a lot of this for example is paper that's done on film, and this is a 280 grit. I'm not sure, I can't read the, oh, it's aluminum oxide, okay, on film on this particular one. And let's see, what else do we have? Sponge, we have those around here somewhere. And I know I threw one in, now that I can't find it. If you've used, anybody use micromesh? Yeah, so that's basically on a soft, kind of a spongy substrate. Here we go. So here's one of 3M's that's put on a sponge. Now these pads are handy if you're sanding like furniture legs and arms for chairs and that sort of thing. These sponge-mounted abrasives are really, really handy. And they may be thin like that, or they may be thick. Some of them are shaped. And then you have all kinds of combinations that are possible that you can find for special use. The bonds are important, and this is one of the places, the bonds and the way the grit is applied and bonded is one of the things that makes a big difference about good, expensive abrasives and the cheap stuff that you buy at wherever, without mentioning Harbor Freight, of course. Because if you've tried, you know that first of all, the abrasives kind of like wear off quickly, and they don't particularly wear down. They come off. They're not well bonded. So the really good bonds can be double or triple, and sometimes the bonds are also include other materials. Like for example, you take this piece right here. You see this kind of pattern that looks like let me see, Bill, are we? You see that pattern that looks like stuff was drug over the top of this? This is put on with the second, probably a double bond the second bond, including a stearated, what's called a stearated coating. And this tends to help keep the sandpaper from loading. An example of that we use all the time, of course, I don't know where we put them.
Hey, Steve, we have a question online.
Yeah, there they
It
are.
seems like 3M has quit making the aluminum oxide on film sandpaper. Any idea why?
Probably because people weren't buying it. They probably had something better. I really don't know. It's been a long time since I've been to 3M. But products come and go. And for a lot of reasons, there's something better that replaces it. Somebody comes along with something cheaper that works as well. And materials can start out being cheap and end up being expensive under certain circumstances. But anyway, I really don't know. Sorry. This is a stearated paper that Joe and I use all the time. And I'll show you what this stuff does here after a while. But it's a stearated coating, and this is actually a film, but it's got a hook and loop back on it. Now the hook and loop thing was kind of interesting because we started out with Velcro, which became the hook and loop deal, and then 3M got really wise, and they thought they were going to be smart and develop their own hook and loop, so they developed Hook It 2. Hook It was the kind of the Velcro deal, and Hook It 2 was one that, here's an example, here's a better example. If you can look at this, you see that? I don't know how the close-up's doing there. Yeah, get as close as we can here, Bill. This stuff right here feels like a soft cloth. And that's actually the loop part in the standard Velcro hook and loop. This and 3M, they did the opposite thing. They put the hook on the paper. And this is really, it's quite coarse. I don't know if it shows up there in the camera, but you gotta have now a special, this kind of a pad here for this to hook to. Because this won't, obviously these are both like two males or two females. It doesn't work. And of course, this doesn't work. Well, wait a minute, then it did, But that won't stick well enough to do the job. So anyway, they did that, and I'm not sure that they're still doing it. They may still be doing it, but it has not been popular. People, and 3M obviously still makes the old style, and it's the one that most people buy most of the time. So we were talking about various combinations of glues and resins for the bonds and the stearated coating and so on and so forth. And grade sizes. And talk a little bit about grade sizes. That's grit, and it's really kind of a complicated situation. If you look at the side of your paper that shows you the table, you'll notice that not everybody, but there are several different means of grading the grit that you're using. So you buy this person's 400 grit and that person's 400 grit, they're not necessarily the same. That's why you have that little sheet right there to tell you which is which. So the P grading system, which came from Europe, is the one that's kind of taken over. Most people use that today. So you see something that says P600, that just means that we're using the P grading system for 600 grit. But if you have that little chart handy and you want to know to step down from one grit to the other and make sure, if you got different brands of paper and so on and so forth, that you don't actually grab the one that looks like it's the finer one and you're going the wrong direction. It's entirely possible if you don't look at the chart. Does that make sense? Okay. So generally, grits run from 25 to 2500, And we got the cross-reference chart there to kind of help us out with that. Scratch patterns depend on more than just the grade size. The kind of abrasive material that you're using will also have an effect on the scratch pattern. And the scratch pattern is what we're actually looking for. In most cases, if you would take a microscope and look at the dust, the sanding dust that you're getting, particularly from the coarser grits, those would actually look like little shavings under the microscope. Like, you think of them as little balls of dust, but they're not. They're little shavings. They're little shavings that were peeled off like a little plane by these little points and little edges on the sandpaper. Now, one of the problems I think we've probably all experienced is we're working along, let's say we're down to 220 grit. We've sanded down, maybe we started with 180, when we went to, I don't know, 220, maybe 320. And all of a sudden, we're seeing in certain places a scratch that stands out from all the others. If you're buying Harbor Freight abrasives, you'll probably see that a lot. The reason for that is that they're not real careful about when they separate all these grits out to make sure that all of the particles are the same size. Now, some ways of applying the grit, not only, now, if you can imagine this, it doesn't only apply it a certain size in a certain way, but they use electrostatic means to make the grits, the grains will stand on end as they're applied. And that's another process that you'll find in more expensive abrasives, so that a greater number of the particles on that paper are going to work for you. It's worth the extra money. And let's see, micron grading says there is the most accurate. So you can see the micron tables on there, and you can compare that across to everything else. Now, there's a lot of ways to, when you start sanding, there's all kinds of ways to actually apply the sandpaper. You can put it in your fingers and just hold it and rub it in. One of the problems with that is that if you're sanding something like, say, let's say pine that has a really hard growth ring and soft winter growth and soft summer growth, when you run over that using your fingers on some fairly thin sandpaper, you're going to sand a lot deeper in those softer areas than you do in the hard areas. So you won't have a flat surface when you're all done. How do you deal with that? You try to bridge that by using something to back it up. You can use, if you were using, like, say, these things, for example, as backing. This one is really hard, so you're not going to depress that. This one is pretty similar. It's a different size. This is a 2-inch. They reach a little bit further. But now we go to this one, and we see that this one is real soft. And there's a medium. Let me see, is that? No, that's another soft one. So we may not have, yeah, here's the medium. So we have basically 3 different softnesses or hardness of backing here. And you need to choose the correct one. If, for example, like when we're going to sand this one, we're going to use a medium one. If we use one that was real soft, it would ride over all those little ridges. It wouldn't cut them down. If we used one that was real hard, it would probably cut its own little ridges the other way here that we don't want to have. So we need to have the medium for this particular job. If we were working on a larger, flatter piece, we could go with the hard one here. Would work really well. So driving, we use a lot of, by the way, we use a lot of 3-inch discs. probably most of the sanding we do with 3-inch discs. We start out with belts and that sort of thing for the work that we do, but when it comes down to the real, the important part of it, we're using an inertial sander or sometimes right angle. Excuse me. So I think what we'll do, to give you an idea of that, we'll take this dude and mount it in here. This is a cherry piece. It's been hanging up to dry for quite a while, and we just redid the outside of this today, and Joe hollowed it. And so we're going to have some noise now, and we're just going to put that support on there. But we would probably start with this. Now, by the way, you can, Bill, is this showing? I put pencil marks all over this because this is turned as close to I can get. People with a lot more skill can probably get their curves a lot better than I got on here. But this still has some problems, and we'll see those here in just a second. Now, Joe's going to try to catch the dust here, and I'm going to just take this. This is cloth backed. It would be like a belt sanding. I'm going to use that kind of like a shoe shine cloth.
What grade is that?
Now I'm going to read the B cloth. So by the way, in my studio we have a 0 tolerance for dust. That would not happen in my studio. We would have, first of all, we would put, and this may help, Joe, we would put a piece of cardboard on here, and we would have a big, like one of those little plastic jobbies here. So we create a low pressure zone right here, and when I hit that with that sandpaper, none of that sandpaper would, none of that dust would come back in my face. It would all go into the dust collector. But you can see now where I put all those pencil lines, you can see where the high and low spots are. Yes?
What grade was that?
This grit was, what did I grab there? Where did I put it?
You got it rolled up.
There it is. That was 120. This is pretty coarse. And now let's talk about that a little bit. There's a thing in woodworkers, among woodworkers and wood turners in particular, you will get frowned upon if you use coarse sandpaper. Somebody's going to tell you you're not a good turner if you have to start out with 60 grit paper. That's BS. The sandpaper is a tool, just like any other tool, and if the proper tool is 60 grit, then the proper tool is 60 grit. Don't let anybody tell you that there's something wrong with you if you need 60 grit to get the job done that you want to do. Because 60 grit would have done this, down further and faster than what I've done. Let's try that again and see if we can get just a little bit more in here. Yeah, I don't know, let's there we go. So, all right. So what I've done in that shorter period of time, you can see I've got a little bit left right in here. But basically, this that was lumpy just a few seconds ago now is nice and smooth across here. And that's because I used a very stiff back paper, and I did this. If I'd have tried to do that with, say, like a piece like this and held it on here with my fingers, I'd have gotten nowhere. We would have just made the deep parts deeper, and the tall parts would have gone down too, of course, but we would not end up getting things straightened away. Any questions about that idea? Let's talk about another thing while we're talking about this, and we'll get that, let's get that back, Joe. I'm going to use a, find one here. Yeah, this will work. When there are details on your work that you don't want to sand off, like in the case of these vessels that we make, this curve right here is very important because this curve says this is Steve Sinner and Joe Merhage's work. This is what we're known for. You walk into a place like any AAW symposium or something like that, people will look across an instant gallery. They see those vessels, they will know they're ours. So we're pretty concerned about this shape right here. And when we sand, you see this little corner right here, this line comes down here and it comes around, and when it leaves right here, it's shooting straight out that way. If I'm not careful when I sand, it's going to shoot that way. And I've just destroyed that shape that we've worked so hard, so long, so many years to be ours, to be identified with us. So what we do on this is we hold it back like this, and you see what I'm doing? I'm pulling it back away from that edge so that at no point does that sandpaper come over that edge. And it's one of the things that you've heard us talk about in critiques many times, especially when people are doing finials. Now you look at Cindy Drozd's finial that we have here on that piece, and you'll see that those details are extremely sharp and extremely well defined. She didn't sand them off. And we frequently see people, especially new returners that start out, that make really nice finials, and then they put the sandpaper on there, and now things all get warped out of shape, and the points are gone, and the flat edges are now round. So you need to be very careful about what you're doing with the sandpaper and how you use it on the piece. Anything I need to cover on that yet, or? I think yeah.
What about direction of turn on the lathe?
I run it backwards. I run the lathe backwards almost all the time because the dust collection is here, the low pressure zone is there, and if I sand just like I just did now, that most of that sanding dust is already shooting in that direction. Some of it is pulled around here, and it loses a little velocity as it comes around, and it gets overpowered by the fact that this is here. Let's talk about dust collection a little bit. Let me look at this. What's going on right here, when we hold this up, the air is obviously going in there. But there isn't more air coming toward there from here than there is from here or here. We got to look at a circle around this opening, actually a sphere around this opening. So air is coming from all of these places going in there. Now if we were to take a backing sheet and put it behind this right now, we could cut off all of this air that comes from here, and it all has to come from up in here. That's the first step that you would do, and that's why we put a piece of cardboard on here, because that keeps the air from coming up from under here. And when you compare that with the dish pan, or whatever you want to call the plastic that we use here, then we've got that low pressure zone, and the kind of dust that we're worried about is the dust that can float in the air. That can't get out of that low pressure zone. It can't come to you. After a full day of work, two of us working in the studio all day long, I can take my glasses off and hold them up to the light, and there is no dust on my glasses. Now, I know a lot of people that have dust collecting filters hanging up in their shop, and it takes dust out of the air. Sure, certainly does. No question about that. But think about the fact that you're breathing the same air that filter is getting all that dust out of. So if the dust is going into the air, while you may be reducing the amount of it, you're still breathing dust-laden air. And it's bad stuff. There are all kinds of toxic reactions that can happen, and suspected cases of cancer and other things that come from wood dust. You don't want to be inhaling that. Any questions about any of that? Okay, let's I'm just going to give you an idea of some other pads that we have here. Just real quickly, there are special shapes like this. Here's one that kind of looks like a shoe. It's got to be the right kind. So you can stick a hook and loop on there, or the other end of it. The 2-inch hook and loop will go here. But again, this is fairly stiff stuff and allows you to press that sandpaper down in a way that won't push it down into the softer parts of the wood. And by the way, we're going to see it on this. I mentioned this is cherry. And it doesn't have the kind of soft and hard differential winter and summer growth rings like pine does. But we're dealing basically, as we come around here, with side grain and face grain and some end grain. And they all cut differently. So that as we do this, we're actually going to sand this out around whether we like it or not. It's almost impossible to avoid doing that, and no matter what. So here's a handy dandy little pad like that. This one goes on your hand like that, and this particular one is really soft. It gets a big area. There are also interface pads, which I should probably mention. Yeah, we're in a baggie. Okay, here they are. Yeah. So, let's see, I got to do it this way. Here's an interface pad that goes from a Velcro to pressure-sensitive adhesive. Oh, I thought Bill, close-up camera? All right, thank you. What's that?
Controllers.
Doggone the controllers. So anyway, there are different interface pads. If you have one of these things here and it's got regular Velcro on it, and you've got a pressure-sensitive disc, and we didn't talk about pressure-sensitive, but that's the other kind of disc. They just peel off the backing and stick it on there with the glue that's on there. So that would be this baby. Would go on here, and then you put your PSA disc on there. This one is IP to 3M. Basically, the 3M hook it to regular Velcro type stuff.
They're all different densities available.
Yeah, on those two, different densities and thicknesses. You might want to make your own. It's kind of expensive to buy those discs. We use hundreds of the 3-inch discs. And the 260L that we use now, I believe we're paying about $1.10 a piece for the 3-inch discs. It's expensive, and it's worth it, but it's expensive. And you can cut your own. You can buy sheets of the material and cut your own, and I do that also. Yeah. So what this is a hole saw, and I ground the teeth off the hole saw and sharpen the edge here. So we can take a stack of sheets of whatever paper we want to use and put this on there and just use the press, little hand press to push it down through. You can hit it with a hammer, whatever you want to do. Put it on a piece of something soft like plastic so you cut right through, and you cut your own disc. You save a lot of money, but you got to take the time to do it too. And we have these in different sizes. Not hard to make those. And let's see, what else extensions. This is just an extension that goes on. If you, for some reason, wanted to reach down further in than what we have right here. And what else we got here? Oh, I should probably mention bristle discs also. I haven't done any of these for a long time, but I used to make a lot of the really, really thin goblets like that and pierce them in various ways. This is one that's been in the studio for many, many years that failed because it was a little bit too thin. You can see that. However, you can see that these things are extremely delicate. This is less than the thickness of my thumbnail for the edge of the goblet. And then when you pierce it all full of holes, it gets even weaker. So when you do that, you still need to sand it. And obviously, if you took any one of these pieces of paper and took your finger in there, it's just gone. So the way we sand those, these are made by 3M. They're called bristle discs. And they're these little, it's like plastic material or rubber material that's infused with various grits. This particular one, the blue or 400 grit, that's what I use a lot. You put that on a Dremel and you go in here with that and you can sand the inside of that and the outside of it, take off all the burrs and make it look real nice. And it's gentle on the very delicate pieces. A lot of carvers like to use these on their wood carvings because you can get into various places. And they come in a lot of different sizes. This happens to be like a 3/4 inch, but you can buy these up to, I think, 1.5 inches or something like that. And there are other styles. They're not all of the bristle discs are styled just like this. But if you look up 3M radial bristle discs or search on that, you'll find all kinds of them. Another oddball, what I should probably talk about before we get lost somewhere else. This is actually, you can see that this is a some kind of a cloth. It looks like a non-woven cloth backing here. This is actually steel wool that's put on the end. This is a real unusual one. Pretty handy way to use steel wool. I started to talk about steel wool. I don't think I finished up. The wool is on the list because it has the advantage of not being harder than our lathes or our tool rests or our chucks and that sort of thing. So if you got a bunch of junk on your chuck here and you want to clean that off, if you use aluminum oxide, you're going to remove metal. Part of your chuck's going to come off with it. Or if it's one of these things here, you can see on this, we've got some. Let's just see if we can get that off of there. We've got some stuff on there. I'm not sure what it is, but if we take steel wool, we can take it right off and polish that up and get all the gunk off. And we have not removed any metal or made this rougher, which we would do if we used regular sandpaper, abrasive. Aluminum oxide, silicon carbide, any of them would do that. So that's really handy stuff to have around for that purpose. We'll do this one right quick. If I find that chuck that I just had, or wrench I just had. I think after we got one more, we have to have the air for it. So I'm going to use, on this, I'm going to use the right angle drill. This is the one that we passed around. And when I'm ready here, so we got a kind of like a race going on, so I'll see if I can have this stuff really set up. Oh, something else I didn't mention is that worn out 220 is not 320, okay? You're wasting your time if you try to use the sandpaper and something else that a lot of people talk about is that if you use worn out sandpaper or if you use really fine sandpaper, you just burnish the wood and then it won't take stain or it won't take varnish or something like that. It's more baloney. If you're using sandpaper that is not worn out, you're not going to burnish the wood, you're just going to create a finer scratch pattern. And if you burnished it to the point where it doesn't want to take stain or something like that, then you have used sandpaper that you shouldn't have been using, or an abrasive that you should not have been using. 320, we're going to go here, and 320, 220, 400, there we go. We're going to start out on this one. I don't have any 60 grit. I'm not sure. I think this was like 120. So are you ready, Joe? Let me get, I want to go like that. Okay, so I'm gonna take the, yeah, that went, that's gone. I'll try this again. Yeah. The Velcro is bad on this disc. And that's,
Grab the one from the extension.
I'm going to try this. This one's pretty hard. It may be too hard. Let's just see if it works. If, by the way, one of the things that will cause that Velcro to go bad on you is too much heat. So if you run your sanding too fast, a couple of things might happen. One is that you'll actually melt the Velcro to the point where it won't hurt anymore. The other thing is, especially on the cheaper sandpapers like hook and loop, the adhesive that holds the hook and loop material to the sandpaper will just come off, and you'll have the hook and loop material left here, and the sandpaper is gone. Let's try this again here. I don't know, maybe this will. And I'm doing something wrong here. I'm running, let's see, I'm running that way. Running this, we're going the right way. I was running them both the same direction. I didn't want to do that. That'll work better. I am sanding from almost fully centered out, almost to the edge. I don't want to hit that edge because I don't want to round it off. The problem I'm having here with this particular, it's a little bit hard, so it's not working as quickly as it should. And I'm going to speed this up a little. We're going to leave some scratches. I hope this looks good when we quit.
If not, keep going.
Are you going finer every time you check that?
What?
Are you going finer grit?
I'm using a couple and then going finer. Yeah, I'm going finer. I think for the purposes of demonstration, that should probably do it. And I think, yeah, we're good. So the first one I used was the coarsest one. Pooped out on me, so I've got some bad scratches in here that I didn't get out, and some tear out that I didn't get out. But basically, how long did it take us, you know, to go from that piece that, go ahead and pass it around. If we'd have spent a little bit more time with that first grit, we wouldn't have the marks that are left in there.
The hardness of the pad determined by the diameter that you're sanding?
Yeah, right. I wouldn't, well, the diameter of the pad, like a 3-inch wouldn't have worked here.
No, the density.
But the density, yeah. Again, if I'd have used the really soft pad, this really soft foam pad, that would not have bridged the low spots and taken the high spots off. It would have fought me.
So the first pad you started with was a medium?
It was a medium, and I had to go to a hard. I would have preferred to stay to the medium, but the Velcro wasn't staying with us. So.
Do you ever wet it down to raise the fibers when you're doing it?
Yeah,
When do you
sometimes. In about the only time I use water anymore. And when I was doing furniture, we always did that. You know, you always did mixed a little bit of hide glue, just a little bit of hide glue and some water, and then you wiped it down, and that stood the grain up. And don't do that. I don't do that. We don't do that on the pieces we're making now. Once in a great while, if we see a need for it, but mostly it's not needed. Where I do use it is if I were working on a hollow form like this or a bowl form like this, and I think we can turn that thing off now. You get tear out. Sometimes it's inevitable to get tear out, and you can't fight it, or you can't get it out of there. If you missed a little water in there and take a scraper and do a really, really, really light cut, and you just kind of like on the scraper will get like a little pile of mud on it. And you just take that top off, and then you do that over, and you do that, you might have to do that 5, 10, 15, 20 times, and you'll work your way down through that tear out and get rid of the tear out. It's a heck of a lot faster than try to sand tear out.
If you're doing the outside of that bowl, would you still use a medium density, or would you go to a harder pad?
On the outside, I wouldn't use a pad at all. I would probably just use strips of paper. We would be working our way down, going with stuff like this. This happens to be some 220, for example, and we would just go down. Sometimes we use random orbital sander, but you know, if we're doing really, really big pieces, and sometimes when you're doing the shoe shine sandpaper thing, you got most of the piece done, but you got a couple of little spots. And you don't want to have to sand down through the entire huge piece to get those 2 little spots out. Then we might go to a random orbital sander and go around that particular spot, being careful to feather it out so you don't end up with a flat looking spot right there. And then go back and finish it with the shoe shine style. And then another thing we'll probably do is end up hand sanding it in with the grain. And we get down to like say 600 grit. And if we go to 600, and how far should you go? I know Don Derry, I think we have one of Don's pieces in the case here. Don Derry never used sandpaper finer than 180 grit, and his work looks just fine. I have a rough time stopping at anything less than 400. It's just the way I feel about it. And if the wood you're working on is highly figured wood and hard wood, then it makes a whole lot of sense to go to finer grits. In those cases, we'll go down to maybe 1,500 or 2,000 grit paper. But that is when you've got that piece of, like I say, really highly figured wood, and you really want all the details to come out on it. On most plain wood, you'd be just wasting, you wouldn't be gaining the thing. As long as you get the sanding scratches out so you can't see scratches, then you're good.
I guess basically, how do you know when to go to the next grit? It seems like I'll think I'm there, and then 2 grits later, I see scratches that I should have caught before.
The first thing that comes to mind is that you may be using paper that has one of those, you know, odd.
Very good chance of that.
Yeah. Then it doesn't matter when you step down, because if you pick up a piece, if you're down to 220, and you pick up a piece of 220 that has one little particle in there that's actually 180, you're just going to have that scratch. Every time that particular spot comes across your wood, it's going to show.
Can't you go back to the 180?
You can go back to the 180, but the next time you come back to that 220 with the bad particle in it, you're going to get the scratch again.
That's the trick of it, to throw that away.
Throw that away. Well, the trick is to not get yourself into that situation to begin with by buying good quality sandpaper.
One thing you didn't bring up is how much pressure do you use?
Ah, good question. How much pressure? And that kind of depends on, it's a combination of speed and pressure. The more pressure you put on, as a general rule, the more heat you're going to make. And if you like to use a lot of pressure and really cut away with that stuff, you're going to have to slow things down a little bit, because the combination of the pressure and the speed will overheat stuff. And by the way, overheating will cause, especially on end grain, nice little stress cracks. And that's really frustrating, because you're sanding away and you get on this part right here, and you get that too hot, that end grain is going to open up little spots. Because even though we consider this to be dry wood, this moisture content on this is probably right now down somewhere around 8 to 10%. There's still moisture in it. You know, if you heat this up right in here and it doesn't heat over here, this is going to get smaller than that, and something's got to give.
I got another question.
Oh, I forgot this one. Yeah, another question.
Do you ever use like a block of wood instead of your foam discs?
A block of wood, I have a sander. It's basically a block of wood, but it is made so that, yeah, it'll clamp the paper in. Yeah, but on this stuff, not really, because we're not sanding flat stuff.
Yeah, well, I meant like if you were going to do a piece of pine or something where you got that hard and soft.
Yeah, if I would use the harder. That's what the harder. You know, this something like this. This is pretty dang close to a block of wood right here. This doesn't give. So yeah, would use that, and if we needed to be sure that we weren't going to dig down into stuff. We're gonna show you one other thing here. We didn't show you that reminds me of another thing too.
Do you want to back up just a second?
Yeah.
Bruce's question on going to the next grit. One thing that helps a lot is to have a good light. There you go. And you can
know, hey, I still got a bunch of scratches here, you know, to work on, or you're seeing them go away, to move up to the next grit. And move, like Steve's and then mine at home, we've got like overarm lights. And pull them down, move it, look
Here.
at all different angles.
Here's what we would do. We got a light. We put the light here, and we look from behind the light. Okay? You're not looking this way or that way, but this way. And
See a lot of things that you wouldn't have seen.
you'll see all the scratches that way.
Sometimes I'll use a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you segmented wood turners. You guys are just.
When would you use?
No
the-
ingrain.
When would you use an inertia sander versus a power sander?
We're going to use the inertial one here. They're pretty much to a certain extent interchangeable, but the inertials work really well. And this happens to be Joe's, and Joe has different size pieces on the end of this, but this one is made for going inside. Using an inertial sander on the inside of a vessel like this works real well. His is, I have one also, and mine is not as stiff as this. It doesn't make a big difference. But, you know, putting that in there, you'd be just amazed at how quickly you can sand the inside of the vessel. And we hope you'll be amazed at how quickly we can sand the outside of a vessel here. This is probably going to make dust that's going to be very difficult. But so we use I mentioned we use the 260L. That's this stuff right here. 3M 260L is, I don't know if you're, yeah. So you can see that. It's a P graded, and that's the model number, you might call it, right there. It's on film. It's steerated. And we can actually use this stuff to sand this varnish. This is urethane. We can sand this urethane about 3 to 4 hours after it's been applied with this paper. With most anything else, this would just load up immediately and you'd be done. So this is going to be a little difficult. I'll try. The whole idea was to show how fast it works. So I should probably have a dust mask on. But anyway, we need, between coats, you need to take all the shine off. So we want to get the shine off of this. I don't know, anybody time that? So basically we're done. And if I'd have done that with the same paper using these little deals here and doing this, I'd never get it done with one. It would probably take 2, maybe 3. So you not only get done a lot quicker, but you use far less material to do that. I didn't spend the time to get this corner right here, but basically this piece is completely ready for another coat of varnish now. All of the gloss is gone off of it. Inertial sander.
How do you clean any dust that's left in there?
2 questions.
Ask it, like, we got a lot of people online.
How do you remove any dust that might be embedded into the wood?
I have an air gun on every lathe right here, and we just blast that off. Now your question was, do we wipe it? Same, yeah. And if I were going to put the final coat, the very last coat of varnish on this, I would not only blow it off, but I'd get a microfiber cloth and I would turn this very slowly, and I would make sure I got every last bit of dust off of that. Because the little bit of dust, as you well know, if we were using gloss finishes, a little bit of dust, it's like tack cloth woodwork. We used to do that in flat work all the time. No reason not to. You don't have to, as far as I'm concerned. I think this works just as well. And by the way, thank you, Joe. Box. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. See, where was I? I lost my train of thought now. Oh, well. Tack cloth. Yeah, whatever.
What speed do you normally turn at, or what determines what speed?
What
sand.
determines the speed is the diameter of the piece. So the speed, and it just bugs the devil out of me that all the lathe makers think they have to put a tachometer on the lathe. How many RPMs this lathe is running doesn't mean a damn thing unless you know the diameter that you're working with and its relationship to that speed and RPMs. Because the important thing is the number of surface feet per minute that are going by whatever you're doing. So if you've got a piece, for example, this lathe right now, I'm pretty sure from the way it's running, it's on high speed, and it is. So none of the lathes in my shop are on high speed. They're all on low speed range because we just don't use high speeds. They're dangerous for one thing, and we don't need them. There's no advantage to them. Now, if we were turning spindles, like chair spindles, we'd be on high speeds, and we'd be running really high speeds because the diameters are down like in a 1 inch, 2 inch maybe. Well, we're doing stuff that's maybe 12, 15 inches in diameter. Huge difference in the surface feet per minute that are coming past you.
I noticed on that little bowl, you were turning it pretty slow, looked like.
Yeah, and that's a different situation. Bear in mind that what was going on there was the relationship between this spinning and that spinning. So this was doing the work. When we were using the inertial sander here, actually the lathe was providing the power. Here, this was providing the power. The only reason we were spinning that is to keep it even all the way around. If we'd have stopped, we'd have just dug a hole somewhere. So, and when I started out, I was running them both in the same direction. And it works a lot better if you run this in the opposite direction of that. Where do you get abrasives? One of the places that I get a lot of my abrasives is the sanding glove in Virginia. And there's one of their cards is on the board over there if you're interested in that. There are a lot of other places that have them now. I would warn you that quite a few of them specialize in cheap abrasive materials, so be careful. Just because it's blue in color doesn't mean it's good. 3M started out using blue in their high quality abrasives, and some other people thought, aha, so they put blue abrasives out and you think you're buying that, it isn't. No, thank you. That would probably make a difference one of these days. Yeah. Should go off automatically. So the sanding glove is a special place. Most Craft Supplies USA has good abrasives. Most wood turning supply places have good abrasives. Some of them have both good and bad.
How about Klingspor?
I'm glad you brought that up. Because Klingspor, we have a lot of Klingspor abrasives. This is a Klingspor, for example. And it's some pretty good stuff. But they have these boxes, and I bought a couple of them just for tonight. I don't know what's in these, so we're going to find out. You can go to the Klingspor Woodworking store and order these. I think they're $20 a piece. And it's just a kind of a catch as catch can. These will be ends of rolls. And you don't really know what you're going to get until you look in here. And we'll see what we got on this one. Joe said he thought you could get them with finer, specify finer stuff, or or coarser stuff. I didn't see that option when I ordered these, but here's what we're getting. So, I can't find if I can, this looks like this is a 360. And here's a 150, a roll of 150. Most of these are, oh, just pass this around. They're usually belt ends and that sort of thing, but they're just roll ends of what they've supplied to commercial manufacturers. And it looks like everything in this box has got about the same kind of they're like sticky, stick-on, they are. So they're sticky back stuff, which I have never seen from them before. But I see a lot of 180 in here, 120. So let's see if the other box got us the same sort of stuff. I was,
Not a band.
what's that? Right there. I had it in my hand a second ago, and now it's gone.
And it's still in your hand.
Many times. And it looks like what I got here on this one is pretty much the same stuff. So, does the camera show inside there, Bill?
Yeah, it is.
So you got, let's see, 9, 12 rolls here, and they run about 3 and 4 inches. And again, this stuff all pretty coarse, pretty coarse. So there's some 220 though. That's a little bit finer. So anyway, that's another place that you can go to get. Joe said that he thought you could specify fine or coarse. I didn't, like I said, when I ordered this, I did not see that option. I just saw, you just order a box and you get what you get. $20, it's, I bought 2 boxes, $40. When you consider the price of good sandpaper, and this is good quality stuff, that's an awful lot of abrasive material for $20. Because you can buy that other stuff, 10 sheets and $20.
Will you cut disc out of that, or?
I don't use PSA stuff very much. I'm not saying that I'm not going to. But yeah, this would be good. I'm a little disappointed here because it appears that it's all PSA in this particular box, these 2 boxes. So, and before I've gotten more of, like that roll that I just had, more of this kind here. How are we doing for time? Yeah, we're close enough. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, Bob.
Everything tonight has been about wood. What about non-wood items like epoxies and so on? Is there any other considerations that you have to use?
Yes, definitely when you're getting into that sort of thing, you want a sterrated abrasive, because most of these will just load up immediately on materials like that. There are, I didn't mention these. These are from Rio Grande, which is a primarily a jewelry supply, jewelry maker supply place. These are micron graded papers, and they're packs of 10, and these are 1, 2, and 3 micron. Take a look at your at your sheet there and see where we are. Yeah. So when you really want to polish something, here you go. Come over to my place. I'll loan you a sheet of this. I can't tell you what I got those for anymore. I can't remember. I don't know, but no.
Plain blade sharpener.
Could be. Yeah. Might have been lapping something, or I don't remember exactly what. Oh, thank you. So, any other questions? So the first rule of sanding is use it like somebody else, like we did when we did that cup. You know, if I'd have taken the old method of taking sandpaper in my hand and sanded that cup out, I'd have been here all night trying to get it flat. And we did it in what, a minute or less a minute or so.
Would you be done with that sandpaper then? Just that little bit?
Yeah, I could if I were really, you know, we've only used the outside edge of this, so I could take it over to my little cutter and cut 1 inch. I do have a 1 inch pads too, but I use them so seldom that I don't bother with it. And most of these, I went through these real quick. Most of these really aren't worn down. They're still good. I was just trying to speed through that one real quickly. Anything else?
I think you mentioned this, Steve, that there's an adapter for hook it to
Right.
say.
Yes. Yeah, we had that one. This one, Velcro to PSA, this one right here. So, and you can buy these in 6 inch, 3 inch, 2 inch, whatever, or you can buy the material. And here's something else that we've done with it. I've really liked over the years. These little pads like this, we use a lot. Here's another one. We use these all the time for hand sanding. And you can buy the Velcro material, the hook and loop material, you can buy in a sheet form. And just take your little cutter here and cut out the size you want. And then get yourself a mouse pad, 1/4 inch thick mouse pad, or the thinner ones if you prefer, and cut some more discs. And then a little, what's the glue I'm trying to think of right here now that you used a glue for mica and stuff. We just used it. Joe left. Contact cement. Glue that on there forever, and they work really well. So, and well, like I say, we end up, we'll do, when we're down to the end on this, we'll do this way with the grain just to make sure the finest of fine scratches are covered up. Because the inertial sander will leave little circular scratches in there, and this will cover that up just real easily.
What are your thoughts on the Abranet?
Abranet, you mentioned that, let's see, and I had, here's Abranet. Well, he's talking about Abranet, and this kind of took the world by storm here a few years ago. This was God's answer to sanding. And what you've got here, basically, this is 400 grit. This is a Mirka, M-I-R-K-A, which I think is Swedish. It's one of theirs. They have Abralan and Abranet. The Abralan is on a foam backing, as I recall. But this, you can see, is a mesh. And the nice thing about this is the sanding dust doesn't load up on it, it goes into the holes. Well, that's true, and it works. And it works pretty doggone well. The problem is you've got a lot less abrasive on that because you got all those holes. There's no abrasive where there are holes. So you gain on one side and you lose on the other. It works well. I didn't find it, and this, by the way, is hook and loop back. I didn't find it worthwhile to keep doing this as opposed to just getting regular old, well, this is kind of coarse, but a 6-inch sanding disc with abrasive all over it.
You thought it wore quicker than regular sandpaper?
I just didn't think it was, it wasn't any better, in my opinion. Now, there are probably uses out there where this will shine, but I haven't found it.
I bought some rolls of that, so I'm still using it, and I find that it wears pretty fast.
wears away.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Remember, when you notice when we were sanding that cup, I think you could see the dust coming out of there like crazy. When that dust quits coming out of there like crazy, that tool is worn out. And it's not a tool that you can sharpen. You have to throw it away and replace it. So if you'd rather not spend the money, then you got a lot of time. As far as I'm concerned, time is the most valuable thing in the entire world. And anything I can do to get more done in less time, I will do. And there are people here that know how I feel about stoplights.
You said on the outside, you just use cloth back most of the time rather
Yeah.
than powered sanding?
Yeah, we use stuff like this that's so stiff. What happens is when you bend it like this, now it's like when you bend sheet metal, it gets strong. See, now this will not go down into the low spots. It'll bridge over all the high spots and cut them down without touching the low spots.
But then do you end up with radial scratches?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But you make them finer and finer and finer by stepping down
And then
with
you
a good...
eventually sand with. How about
Yeah.
like on a bowl? I mean, you're doing longer pieces.
Right, right. The bowl we would do pretty much like I did this, that little cup. This basically, this is the way I would sand a bowl, is the way we sanded this.
The outside
And
too.
those of you who have been around here a little bit have heard us mention many, many times in critiques about people having little knuckles in their bowls and little sharp spots and little dimples and things like that. Sanding this way, they're all gone. You make that really nice, smooth curve in there that is sweet. Again, there's the first coarsest one I didn't go far enough with because it came off. So that would have made this a whole lot better and faster. And by the way, looking at this one again, you can see these lines right along in here, and you notice that line disappears right here. Remember what we said about the wood density being different in one place than the other and sanding deeper in one place than the other? That's exactly what happened here. That line around there was the same depth when we started to sand. But we sanded down further in this part of the wood there and this part of the wood here than we did here and here.
So how would you get rid of that?
Well, that first coarse one should have gone further. I could see that was still there right away, but when you do a demonstration, you take a chance. So,
Could have had Joe go dig that thing out of there.
yeah, could. Got to blame it on somebody. Many, many years ago, I stepped up here to do a demonstration, and somebody mentioned something about, I had a piece in here, I think, between centers. Somebody sitting there says, "You ever have one of those come out of Lathe?" And I said, "Never." No, it hasn't happened. Guess what? That was the first one. So I blame that on Sarge, though. Sarge had put it in the lathe. It wasn't. I checked it after he put it in. It was not really his fault. But since he had put it in there, I blamed it on him.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I believe I speak for everybody when I learned a whole lot tonight.